My boys are obsessed with how many steps they take each day. Every night they have a competition to see who's done the most. And every time I speak to my mum, she's chuffed that she's done 10,000 steps a day as well. So where's measuring your steps come from? How do the watches work it out? And how many steps is actually enough to benefit your health? It turns out the idea of using some sort of instrument to count the number of times you step during a day is actually nothing new. In 1506, Leonardo da Vinci actually considered such an instrument in his quest for a distance measuring device when he was instructed to construct maps for the Italian government. The pedometer that da Vinci invented was based on a pendulum swinging action, possibly inspired by the swinging of your legs during walking, something like that. Unfortunately, his pedometer design didn't work that well for measuring distances, so he invented a wheelbarrow-like odometer instead. Every few turns of the wheel on the wheelbarrow, it dropped a pellet into a box. And at the end of the distance travelled, the pellets were counted up and the distance was calculated based on the known circumference of the wheel. We still actually use the odometer to measure distance today. There's actually one in your car, although we no longer have to count pellets, of course. Now, it's a little bit silly to suggest we all start running around pushing wheelbarrows in front of us to determine how far we walk each day. Da Vinci's invention was actually designed to measure distance for both commerce and war. It was never intended as a motivational tool for tracking physical activity. Compared with modern times, Da Vinci lived in a time where there were more opportunities to be naturally active. There was no need to track physical activity in his era. But times and circumstances have changed, and modern examples of the pedometer have evolved to address a new need. Now, although pedometers have been around for quite some time, they've never really caught on, or they never really did catch on, mainly due to earlier versions not being that accurate, until the advancement of technology and the emergence of smartwatches. One of the main reasons pedometers didn't quite catch on is because of confusion over what they actually do and don't accurately measure. So, pedometers do accurately count the number of steps taken. With less accuracy, they can be used to estimate distance walked, and with the least amount of accuracy, they can be used to estimate calories burned. To understand what pedometers do and do not measure, it's important to know how one works. If you were to look inside your smartwatch, you'll likely find a lever of some kind that shakes up and down, a little bit like this. Each deflection of the lever registers on the pedometer screen. When you walk, your body moves up and down, and the pedometer's lever gently shakes up and down with each step that you take. The pedometer simply counts the number of times the lever deflects and outputs the number of steps. Now, the thing is, and this is really quite important to remember, the pedometer itself isn't actually perfect. For example, some movements such as weight shifting, a bit of bending or jumping may deflect the lever and be recorded as a step. Most pedometers, even the new electric ones that are in smartwatches, also don't necessarily pick up steps taken during slow walking, like those taken while you're milling around the house. So bear in mind when you're looking at your step count that your smartwatch will count some non-steps as steps and actually miss some true steps as well, if that makes sense. So the number that everybody seems to work to is 10,000 steps a day. If you achieve 10,000 steps a day, you're going to get fitter, right? Not necessarily. As with any physical activity, it all depends on the individual. 10,000 steps may be far too much for an older person or someone that lives a sedentary lifestyle, and nowhere near enough for a child who runs around every single day at school. So where did the number of 10,000 steps actually come from? Now, the specific value of 10,000 steps has its roots in the popularity of Japanese walking clubs and a pedometer manufacturer slogan from the 1960s. A pedometer came onto the Japanese commercial market in 1965 under the name of Manpo-kei, which literally translates to 10,000 steps meter. And walking and hiking organisations adopted and promoted the goal as a slogan, and the Japanese public loved it. In fact, the concept of achieving 10,000 steps a day remains widely familiar to Japanese households today. Now, the first scientific study to include a specific step count was published in 1995, comparing two groups of obese and sedentary men with type 2 diabetes. Both groups lived in a hospital and were given a special diet. Only one group was told to take at least 10,000 steps a day using a pedometer, and the other group was not. The pedometer program group averaged 19,200 steps each day, and at the end of the study lost an average of 7.7 kilograms, almost 3.6 kilograms more than the second group that dieted only and averaged 4,500 steps a day. Now, results like this made lots of researchers take notice, but we need to be careful how these results are interpreted, because if you look a little bit closer at the study, the claim that 10,000 steps per day was the reason for the dramatic results was not necessarily accurate. See, the patients in that study actually lived in hospital, protected from daily schedules and obligations, and likely had supportive and encouraging staff members who prompted regular walking bouts. So whilst the results were impressive, they actually bared no resemblance to everyday living. The results were actually attributed to averaging 19,000 steps a day, almost twice as many as the 10,000 steps that suggested. So the key to using step count to meet your recommended physical activity guidelines is to first set yourself a time goal, so the number of minutes of walking a day, and then calculate how many steps are needed each day to reach that goal. Any brisk walking that lasts at least 10 minutes counts towards meeting your physical activity guidelines. However, just counting steps using your smartwatch doesn't ensure that you'll achieve the minimum 10 minutes of walking. You generally need to plan any walking if you're going to use step count appropriately. As a rule, it's recommended that you calculate how many steps you take every minute of a brisk walk. Now, this is really important because someone with lower fitness levels who takes fewer steps per minute than a fitter adult will need fewer steps to achieve the same time of walking. One way to set a step count goal is by doing the following. Firstly, it's important to find out how many steps you take on an average day. To do this, you will need to record the number of steps you take on several ordinary days that include no real planned walking for exercise. Let's say, for example, that average is about 5,000 steps a day. You'll then need to measure the number of steps you take during a planned 10-minute brisk walk. Let's say this is 1,000 steps. For a goal of 40 minutes of walking, your goal will total 4,000 steps. To calculate a daily step goal, add your usual daily steps of 5,000 to the steps required for a 40-minute walk of 4,000 to get your total steps per day target of 9,000 steps. Then, each week, you can gradually increase the number of steps you make each day until your step goal is reached. It's important to remember that the rate of progression depends on each individual person. So, some people who start out at 5,000 steps a day can add 500 steps per day each week. Others who are less fit and starting out at a lower number of steps should add a smaller number of steps each week. So gradually increase it. So the goal of walking 10,000 steps a day is not actually a guideline, but it is a really simple and easy to remember way you may choose to meet your recommended physical activity guidelines. Be mindful though that the number of steps you need to make each day to benefit your health can be different for each and every one of us. 10,000 steps a day just might not be sustainable for older adults or those living with chronic diseases, and is probably far too low for children who already average between 12,000 and 16,000 steps a day anyway. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. As usual, please like and share with all your friends, and see you next time.